Dear participants and guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to welcome you at the International Symposium, the Post-COVID Era, Redefining and Redesigning the Global Economy. Dear Mr. Uzan, dear Mr. Franklin, for our university, it's a great honor to be among the co-organizers of this most respected event, the speakers of which come from over 15 countries. We are happy that we were able to bring together at this platform experts who are globally renowned, represent different institutes and organizations. This discussion platform creates the prerequisites for the consolidation of the public in the world in order to develop the global approaches to the challenges of the present-day situation. We're grateful to our partners for their attention, for their friendliness towards Russia, for the willingness to work together in the basis of which there is the understanding of mutual interests and trust and confidence. Well, of course, we can see that lately trust and confidence were undermined to a certain extent, and so our purpose is to consolidate, to strengthen relations between the researchers from the world. The program of our symposium is many-faceted and covers different aspects of financial architecture, global and regional integration, privatization, money exchange and circulation, the problems of the human living, and transformation of the cities, climate problems, and the issues of the transition to low-carbon economy. The pandemic is a serious challenge for the humanity, and it actually made the disbalances even sharper, the disbalances typical of our planet in the past. We can see the crisis of the present-day model of economic relations, and the key issues is to answer the question how to build the logic of actions, not only just to restore the economies that suffered from the pandemic, but how to make sure that this rebuilding is sustainable, long-term, and has a high-quality structure, can assess in the overcoming of social disbalances. The cosmetic measures aimed at the protection of the existing paradigm cannot provide us with the outcome. The only the only way to overcome the problems is to create a new model for development, and this issue has been discussed over the past 13 years in Russia. And of course, we understand that today we are at a crucial point, and the symposium of today will make it possible for us to touch upon these matters. Last year, the decline in global economy was maximal since the days of the Second World War. The losses at the labor market by the end of 2022 amounted to almost 250 million. That's how many jobs were lost. Just over the first 9 months of the previous year, the loss of the income in the world was $3.5 trillion, and this keeps growing. So that means that the social tension in the society is deepening in different countries. With all of that, the post-crisis rebuilding is not that easy. 20 to 30 years ago, the problem could be resolved through the stimulation of macroeconomic policies. Today, these mechanisms have exhausted themselves and do not work or hardly work at all. According to assessment of the IMF, the sovereign debt and the private sector debt has increased 200% of the global GDP, and in certain economies it went up to 30% of the national GDP. And in the well-developed countries, the interest rates are practically at the zero level, and in the key developing countries at the historically lowest level. Well, of course, this creates concern among us, and this makes the stimulation measures, traditional measures, through the increase of private crediting hardly possible. And the so-called quantitative easing, which just leads to the expansion of financial assets, does not resolve the problem. And the gap between the real and virtual economy is fraught with unpredictable results. The model of globalization suggested at the end of the 20th century less and less complies with the new economic reality, and the principles of free trade, open competition, private competition are replaced by the language of trade wars. And in spite of all these challenges, in spite of all the contradictions, we should look positively at the future, into the future. We should be on the side of positive work, and this positive agenda is what we're discussing today. We should join our efforts to resolve the problems and to tackle the challenges. And we work for 2 days, today and tomorrow, and we are planning to prepare as a result a joint communique which reflect our consolidated attitude and standpoint on concerning different aspects of global economic development. We hope very much that the meeting we have today and tomorrow is the basis of the further long-term cooperation of the leading economists in the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rector. It's a great pleasure for the Reinventing Bretton Woods Committee to cooperate with your university. I think you are celebrating your 90th anniversary birthday. And with my co-host, the Hamburg Institute for International Economics and the Frankel Zuckerman Institute, it's a great honor to be able for the next 2 days, to team together and to put together a very high-level symposium that brings, as you said, more than 15 countries represented, and to try to discuss not only the short-term economic outlook for the global economy, but the long-term. That's why we call it redefining and redesigning the global economy. And I wanted to start my remarks, in fact, why we choose that title. I think we didn't put reinventing, but as you know, since the COVID-19, the concept of reinventing is everywhere. We need to reinvent our growth model. We need to reinvent multilateralism. We need to reinvent the way we deal with pandemic all over the world. And this is, in fact, what the G20 was all about to do. You remember the different financial crises that occurred in the 1990s and the great financial crisis in 2008 that elevated the G20 at the leaders level. And now, this initiative with this conference is all about to think about the post-virus order. And I believe that we are not going to go back to the previous growth model. And we need to think and to define a new growth model that's going to be based on sustainability and social compatibility that's going to be at the heart of the world economy moving forward. And of course, about also inclusive multilateralism. And in order to do that, we need to think about a major reallocations of capital and labor around the world, not only for the advanced countries, but also for the emerging market. But before we go to this long-term challenge, we need to deal with the short-term economic outlook. As everyone knows, the policy response all over the world has been dramatic. The whatever it takes has been really implemented all over the world, particularly in the advanced countries versus the emerging market. And I know that this short-term economic outlook, is still, dealing with the greatest recession that we had since the 1929. But there are risks towards this scenario because we are still doing with a stop and go in terms of economic activity. And of course, what is maybe the most concern in the short-term point of view is maybe the risk of divergence in the global economy, because some part of the world might be growing quicker than the rest of the world. So that's why international cooperation will be more needed to try to really think about orchestrating international policy coordinations when we are going to get out of this COVID-19 and this pandemic. And of course, the second point is all about normalization of macroeconomic policies. You remember, all of us here, that in order to deal with the great financial crisis, there was a whatever it takes moment with monetary policy. And now it has been all about fiscal policy. And the big challenge for macroeconomics will be to try to deal with this new interdependence between fiscal and monetary policy moving forward. Of course, as we are called, our institution is entitled Reinventing Bretton Woods. This is more critical than ever to orchestrate international corporations. And I think the big thing would be how we can revitalize international cooperation, international coordination in the next decade. I think, it's maybe more difficult for policymakers, to deal with cooperation and coordination when you can do face-to-face meeting, because cooperation are always being, less protocol, bringing together the key policymakers and to come up with some concrete solutions. I think redesigning and redefining the global economy, that's what has been the challenge of this conference, and what we wanted to go out is a short-term macroeconomic outlook, but moving forward to questions that are going to define the next decade, the future of money, and should central bank issue central bank digital currency, what will happen for the international monetary system, is going to be about international cooperation and the future of multilateralism. We have been seeing over the last decade a rising of new institutions, AIIB, the BRIC, the New Development Bank. Are we seeing a fragmented global governance? That will be one of the questions we will raise. And of course, what will be post-COVID, the future of global finance and the future of global trade? That's going to be another big challenge moving forward. And of course, policymakers, you have a change in the US administrations who already sent signals that they want to go back to the international machinery of corporations. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is all about sustainable development goals. This is all about inclusive growth and inclusive multilateralism, and how we are going to move forward to come up with what the G20 recently mentioned in a creation of a new working group, the common public goods. So without ado, let me thank my co-host, the Hamburg Institute, the St. Petersburg, and all the staff for making this conference, a reality, and all the work behind it, even it's on a Zoom discussions, and the Frank-Zuckerman Institute who are joining us, to be part in putting this program together. And of course, all the speakers around the world, from China to Russia, from emerging market to Europe, who have accepted our invitations. Over to you, Annie. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. You can't see me because I've just passed my first COVID test positively, so it was negative, and I'm sitting in a room, so you can't see me. So welcome to the audience from wherever you are listening and watching. So this is another great opportunity, I think, to discuss the crisis and all the topics we have seen even before the crisis. And so first of all, I would like to thank the organizers, Mark, especially you, and Igor and Jacob. This is I'm very grateful for cooperating and having brought to stage this special conference. And I think we know from the past that when we had a crisis of such a dimension, the aftermath of such a crisis was very decisive. So we will have some decisive moments in the aftermath of the crisis, and I think this can be an opportunity to shape, to redefine the global economy, but it can also be a threat. So I think we should be aware of the critical moments, and I think to discuss all these topics together and to create change and cooperation is decisive, is very important, because we have some fundamental and paradigmatic changes ahead of us. So I'm again very grateful to come together with some high-level speakers in the next 2 days, and so I don't have so much to add to what has been said before. So I would like to stop here and to hand over to Jacob. So thanks, and I'm wishing us some great discussions throughout the next 2 days. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The microphone was handed to me. Mark, is it okay?
Yes, very good.
I'm delighted to join this extraordinary group in an extraordinary event. But I will not start properly if I did not identify especially the intellectual father of this business, which is really Mark Uzan, the founder and the turbo behind those international conferences and meetings that he has produced extraordinarily important public good. And of course, I appreciate very much the hospitality of our host. We are talking online, but really the St. Petersburg State University of Economics. And it only shows you that geography matters much less, because at the same time, we are hosted by the important institute that Henning Wöppel just introduced us. In other words, and this is the theme of these conferences, namely, distances are shrinking, and distances are not just geography. We will spend some time on geography, on the issue of cities, on the issues of trade, which have to do with distances. But really what we have learned in this era is the fact that gaps are in so many areas, in geography, in politics, in science, in technology, and the interconnectivity is a fact. And what the system is supposed to do is to make the best of this fact, to make it a workable fact, to internalize the externalities, and to prevent disturbances to this interconnection. The title of the conference is very optimistic. It speaks about the post-COVID era. Well, I must say, those who designed it must be very, very optimistic, because I think that we will probably stay within the era of the COVID for a long time. Not only the COVID as a virus, but the COVID as a syndrome that highlights how science, technology, medicine, people, travel, interaction are going to shape our new world. Who would have thought 2 years ago to have this conference online? We would all have gone to airports, we will all go to registration, to hotels, we will have a social program to make sure that everything works well, and people from the hot countries will go to the cold countries. Here you see at your comfort, in a way, you save resources, you lose some of the human touch, but you are creating a new system of interconnectivity. So yes, it is the post-COVID era in the long-term sense, but it is the COVID syndrome that will stay with us. And therefore, the world has to be reacting to it. And yesterday is an important part of history in the sense of teaching us lessons, but we need to redesign it. We need to identify where the obstacles were and how can we make sure that those obstacles are being overcome. I think that the fact that the shock to the world started from the health area, an area that is not necessarily the day-to-day engagement of the participants in this conference, but it impacted hugely the economy, the politics, etc., which comes to show that science, technology are universal. And I think that by now we all also have learned that those who deny reality are going to fall behind and even tragically lose their life. And those who are respecting science and technology develop vaccines, become ready for the new world. So let me just say that while we are a group of social scientists and economists, etc., the implications are profound for everything. So I would also say that it is not a single conference. It's a guidepost along a series of conferences. And maybe these meetings in maybe the same form or somewhat different form will continue as an ongoing building, because as you can see, the title does not speak about the new world or the redesigned world or the redefined world, but rather a call for action, designing, defining. It is an ongoing process, and this interaction is part of it. So in this regard, I want to appreciate very much the opportunity of the organizers and to return the microphone again to Mark Uzan. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you very much.